I'm Beverly Payne, and this is Payne and Simple Makes. Thanks for joining me today. So far we have made two different kinds of paper flowers out of cardstock. I've shown you how to make simple layered flowers, and I've also shown you how to make a rolled rose flower. So today I'm going to show you how to make a giant flower, just like this Black-Eyed Susan that I've made. Simple cardstock for the petals and for the center, but you'll also get to use your rolled flower technique to create this center. And then if you want, you can create some sepals on the back. This is totally optional, but it's all using cardstock and, for the most part, hot glue. Stick around, watch the whole video. I can't wait to see what you create. Once you're in Design Space, choose a new project and then upload the file that you downloaded from my Makerspace that has all of the different pieces for this project in there. So the first thing you want to do is to ungroup, and then I like to just check to make sure my sizing is correct. So I'm going to click on each of these pieces. Those petals there should be about 10 inches high. My circle should be about 3.5 inches. And then just checking my sepals, making sure that they are about 8 by 6. So everything looks pretty good. So click Make It, and your project or your Cricut Maker will sort everything into projects. Now, we could have done this before we click Make It, but we're going to need multiple copies of some of these things, and it's going to start to look crazy in here with all these mats, but that's okay, don't worry about it. So we need 10 of these strips. So I changed my project copies to 10, and I'm going to change my paper size to 8.5 by 11. So you can see that I've got like four mats, I think, of my strips and my brown circles. We really don't need that many brown circles, we only need 2. But we did need to have at least 10 of those brown strips. So you click Continue, make sure your Maker is connected or whatever Cricut machine you're using, light cardstock, and then go ahead and make it. Now let's look at our petals. We have 2 different petals. One of them has a smooth tip and one of them has a notched tip. I'm going to need 24 petals all together, so I need 12 of each one. So I changed my project copies to 12, and I changed my paper size to 8.5 by 11. And so you can see the number of mats we've got in this project has gone up a lot, but don't worry about it because we're not going to cut all these mats. But even on 8.5 by 11 paper, it looks like I could probably get another petal. Design Space usually does pretty well at making use of your paper, of your size, getting as many pieces on a piece of paper as possible, but I think I can do better in this case. So I'm going to go down to my last petal mat. I'm going to click on it and click on those 3 dots and click and choose Move, and I'm going to move that petal to my first petal mat. So I click on it. It'll give you a little check box, and you're gonna, or check mark, and you're gonna come down and confirm, yes, I want to move that piece to that mat. So now it's on your first petal mat, and you can scroll up as I'm doing, and you can see that that mat is highlighted, and it actually just copies it on top of one of the others. This one is easy to see because it was a notched petal on top of a smooth tip petal, but you want to just move it over and position it where you would like. So I'm going to go back down to that last petal mat. I'm going to click on those 3 dots for the remaining petal, click Move, and I'm going to say Move to the second petal mat, confirm it, and then again I can just move it and reposition it how I want. And so I'm going to do this with all of my petals so that I can save some paper here, right? I'm going to save some paper. Now, my sepals and my green circles, well, they're a little harder to deal with. But notice how I'm clicking on these circle elements, and I'm using the 3 dots, and I'm hiding those circles that I don't need. So I'm going to cut out 4 of these sepals, and these sepals are so oddly shaped that it's hard to get more than one on a page, and you can see that it just doesn't quite fit. I still feel like I could have gotten 2 on there, but I'm just going to go with this. We'll just roll with it. And you can choose to make sepals or not. If you are going to try to put your flowers on a stem, you probably do want to use these, to cut these out. Okay, so I have cut out, you can see here, I've cut out 10 of the strips that I'm going to need for the center of my flower. And you can see here on my mat that I have started to cut out my petals. So you want to make sure that all your petals get cut out. You need 24. So I'm doing 12 of one design and 12 of the other design. One design has a smooth tip, one has a notch tip. And I designed these petals based on a real black-eyed Susan that I had in my garden. So when everything's cut out, you've got 10 strips, 10 brown strips. This is what we'll use for the center. We've got 2 brown circles that we'll use to mount everything, and then 2 green circles, which we will use when we do the sepal. If you're not doing sepals, you don't have to use those. We've got 12 flower petals that have a smooth tip, and we have 12 that have the notch tip. You're also going to need something like a paper curler and maybe some fondant tools. You need your hot glue gun and maybe some regular Elmer's glue too. I'm just using this regular Elmer's craft glue to glue my strips together for the center. So I'm going to do that first, and that'll give them time to dry a little bit, the glue to dry a little bit, so that maybe it won't come apart later. So we're just going to glue all 10 of these end to end. And I'm not going to make you watch me glue all 10 of them, just a few, and then we'll move on to the next step. You'll actually see it slide right off the table here in a second. But just make sure those are glued together. Now, let's look at our flower petals. You're going to glue every single one of them the same way. You're going to put about 1/4 of an inch, possibly a little more, down at the corner, and you're going to stick those 2 corners together. And I'm taking this round fondant tool, and I'm making basically just a score line. So if you've got a bone folder, you could use that. You could use an old credit card. And then I'm going to take the paper curler and curl those petals a little bit. So I'm going to do that with each one. And in fact, on this one, I'm using the paper curler to do the scoring line as well. But you don't need a whole lot of hot glue, just a little bit down at the corner where that little divot has been cut out. And the reason that divot is there is to help give the petal some shape. And then you're doing the scoring and the curling to also help give the petal some shape and make it a little more realistic. Now we're going to do this, like I said, on all 24 petals. Now you might not have cut out 24, and that's okay, but we're going to use the same process no matter how many different petals we cut. And again, I'm not going to make you watch me do all 24 of these. Okay, so I'm going to take my 2 brown circles and I'm going to add a lot of hot glue. This is going to be the base that we will add our petals to, so you want to make sure that it's good and sturdy, and that's why I cut 2 and just glue them together, because this is like cardstock. You could use something else. If you wanted to cut some cardboard, that would work too, because eventually you're going to get it all covered up. but I just glue 2 circles. And I'm going to do the same thing with my green circles. These are going to reinforce that base, but we're going to use them on the back to help support those sepals. So just put that hot glue on there, press it down, and then set those aside and let those dry. So we're going to next look at making the center of our flower, because it's going to need some time for the glue to dry too. So you want to take your tweezers, and I would suggest using tweezers instead of a quilling tool here. But you're just going to grab one end of that strip with your tweezers, and then you're going to start rolling. And you do want to use one hand to make sure that all those rolls stay together. You don't want any poking up or poking down at this point. You want to try to keep it all even. And obviously, although this technique is the same one that we used when we were making rolled flowers, this strip is a lot longer. And so our coil is going to be much bigger when we're done rolling. And just go slow. You don't have to worry about doing this fast. Oh, that petal was about to get me off track here. So once you get to the end and you've got this nice coil of brown paper, you're going to remove your tweezers. And you want to hang on to that so it doesn't come unrolled. And then you want to start to shape it. So some Black-Eyed Susan centers are kind of flat, more like a daisy or even a sunflower. But some of them are more mature, and as they mature, sometimes they get more cone shape, and that's what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do here. Now, and you can choose, you can keep yours flat or you can try to make them more cone shape. So when you have it formed the way you want it to look, go ahead and put some glue on the end of that final strip and get that glued together there. And then, and you can see inside what it looks like from underneath, you want to put some hot glue all the way around that base, and inside the base just make some lines of glue from as far inside as you can get your glue gun out to the base, and this will help to hold all those coils in place because you don't want that coil popping out. Alright, so once you have that formed, we just need to let it dry. So now we're going to go back to that brown circle and we're going to start putting our flowers on. But before we do that, I need some guides, and these don't have to be exact, and you may not need guides, that's okay, but I'm going to kind of draw a circle onto my base that lets me know where that center is supposed to go when it's all said and done. And so I'll just kind of fill in that circle. Does not have to be exact because it's all going to get covered up with the petals anyway. And once I have that circle sort of sketched in, I'm going to go and sketch in another circle that is between the outside edge of the brown paper and that inner circle where the center of the flower is going to go. And this will just help me when I'm positioning my petals, because I'm going to have to make basically 2 layers when you're working with this many petals. So you want to put a little bit of hot glue on the base of the outside or the back side of the flower down near the base, and then just add it to the circle between the edge and that first circle that you sketched there. Oh, I guess it's the second one you sketched, but the first circle on the paper. So I put one at my 12 o'clock and then one at 6, and it's probably opposite for you, and I'm not going to make you watch me do all of these, but you're just going to keep adding flower petals until you get the whole circle covered. And then it's time to place that center. So I'm going to put hot glue on the actual center itself on the brown construction paper, or the brown cardstock, excuse me, and then also on the flower base right in the center. And I'm going to let that, press that down, and I'm going to let it dry a little bit. Fortunately, with hot glue, things kind of adhere pretty quickly, and so you can usually keep working on a project if you need to. So now it's time to work on the sepals. If you don't want to use sepals, then you're done at this point. I think the sepals lend, I don't know, just an extra touch. It makes it look a little more realistic. And as I said earlier, if you plan to use a stem, put a stem on this, then you probably want the sepals, because it'll just make it look a little better if you've got that greenery. So I'm going to use my curling tool, and I'm going to curl the arms on each of these green pieces. If you look at a black-eyed Susan growing in the garden, if you look at these pieces on the back side of the flower, they are very curly, curling away from the actual flower petals. So it's good for them to be really curly. So now I'm going to take this, actually it's the fondant tool, but you could use a pencil or whatever, something that's round, and I'm just going to give them a little squeeze around the handle, and that is again just giving them some shape and some dimension. There's the fourth one. And now I'm going to bend the edge back. And this, of course, again will be helpful if you're going to use a stem, because you can wrap that edge around a stem and help to maybe to cover up where they're attached. So I just eyeball this and give it a little fold. You don't have to be exact with this. There are some parts of projects where you do need to be precise. This is not one of those parts. Okay, so let's put those sepals on. Just a line of hot glue or two. Glue to the base. And again, we're going to do sort of a 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock kind of pattern. And I'm just using 4 of these pieces, so since there's kind of 4 arms on each piece, that's giving me like 16 different pieces. But if you wanted more arms, you could certainly add more. You could cut some more of these. So just press all those pieces down. And now we're ready to glue that whole back onto the back of our flower. So just put a nice coating of glue there. I just put several rounds. These eventually get placed on my wall, so I wanted to make sure that we've got a good contact there. So press it on the back, position it well, and see it helps to cover up that brown. It makes it look a little more natural. Just want to make sure that that's pressed on well, and I'm going to add a little bit more glue. And so just press it, and there you have a Black-Eyed Susan made out of cardstock. Please let me see what you've made, and if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe.